You keep wondering why your heart leans toward people who wound you, why something inside you reaches for hands that do not hold you gently. You try to name this pull, yet every word feels too small for the weight it carries. There is a strange silence that lives in this pattern, a silence you know well. It sits in your chest like a familiar shadow, and even when you walk away, it follows you with the quiet certainty of a memory you never asked to keep. You tell yourself you are done, that this time you will not return, yet something deep within you lingers at the doorway, and you feel confused by the tenderness you still offer to those who never learned how to receive it. There is a moment, almost imperceptible, when you realize the hurt is no longer accidental. You see the signs, you notice the coldness, you sense the withdrawal, and still your heart softens instead of closing. A part of you believes that if you love a little harder, if you stay a little longer, if you show them the depths of your devotion, they will finally turn toward you with the warmth you have been longing for. But each time you try, something inside you fractures, and you feel that quiet ache rising again. You carry it like a small flame cupped between your hands, hoping it will guide you, even as it burns you. Maybe you call it attachment, maybe you call it trauma, maybe you call it fate. Yet none of these names fully capture the truth that lives beneath your skin. You sense that the answer lies somewhere deeper, hidden in a place the mind cannot easily reach. It feels ancient, like a dream you have lived many times before. When you close your eyes, you see flashes of old rooms, old faces, old wounds. And there is a strange familiarity in the pain you keep returning to, as if it echoes something you once needed to understand. You are not weak for loving this way. You are not foolish for returning. You are not broken for longing for someone who could not meet you. What pulls you back is not the other person, but the unfinished story inside you. A story woven from shadow and longing. A story shaped by the moments your heart learned that love and hurt can feel like the same doorway. You stand before this doorway now, knowing you have walked through it too many times, knowing you cannot continue the same path without losing yourself along the way. And yet, beneath it all, something still calls your name. A quiet whisper, a gentle stirring, a truth that has been waiting for you to slow down enough to feel it. This is where the real journey begins. Not in understanding why others hurt you, but in discovering why a part of you believes you must stand in the fire to be loved. There is something inside you that knows this pattern is not about punishment, but about revelation. Something within you is trying to wake you, trying to lead you back to a place you once abandoned without even noticing. You might not see the full picture yet, but you can feel the shift. A soft turning, a subtle invitation, as if the night around you were beginning to open, revealing the faint outline of a path you have never walked before. You sense that this path leads inward, toward the part of you that has been waiting quietly in the shadows. And as you take a breath and listen, you realize that the question is no longer why you love those who hurt you, but what part of you believes this is the love you deserve. And somewhere inside you, a door begins to open. You stand at the threshold of a very old pattern, one that seems to rise from the deepest layers of your psyche. When you ask why you love those who hurt you, you are touching a part of yourself that has been shaped not by logic, but by the unconscious. This place inside you speaks in symbols rather than explanations, and it leads you back to the rooms where your earliest understandings of love were formed. You may not remember the details with your mind, yet your body remembers the atmosphere, the tone of the voices, the weight of the silences. These impressions live within you like echoes in a quiet forest, guiding your footsteps without you even noticing. When you care for someone who wounds you, you are often responding to the imprint of a wound that once taught you what closeness felt like. The psyche does not seek what is good, it seeks what is familiar. Familiarity feels like safety, even when it hurts. And so you find yourself drawn to the same emotional landscape, repeating the same dance, hoping that this time the ending will be different. This is not a conscious choice. It is the pull of an old shadow trying to resolve itself through the presence of another person. Your heart returns not out of weakness, but out of longing for a healing that never came. There is a moment when you recognize that the person before you is not the source of your suffering, but a mirror reflecting the wound you carry. You see the same softness reaching for the same absence, and the same silence rising after the same disappointment. This recognition is subtle, yet it changes everything. It shows you that the heartbreak you feel today is connected to a much earlier heartbreak, one that shaped the very architecture of your emotional world. In this sense, the person who hurts you becomes a symbol, a doorway, a guide leading you back to the part of yourself that you have avoided for years. The psyche always seeks completion. What is unfinished insists on being revisited, not to punish you, but to liberate you. When you love someone who wounds you, it is often the child within you trying to undo the moment when love first became tangled with pain. You are not choosing the hurt, you are choosing the chance to finally transform it. The unconscious uses repetition as a form of healing, drawing you to people who resemble the emotional patterns of your past. It hopes that what was once broken can finally be made whole. As you move through this realization, you begin to feel a shift inside. The forest that once felt dark and impenetrable now seems illuminated by faint shafts of light filtering through the branches. You sense that the shadow you have been afraid of is not a threat, but a messenger. It carries the fragments of your unlived story, waiting for you to gather them with compassion. Each painful relationship becomes a trail of breadcrumbs leading you deeper into your own inner landscape. And as you follow this trail, you see that the very people who hurt you have unknowingly pointed you toward the parts of your soul you forgot to claim. The heart repeats what the mind has not yet understood. And so you return again and again to the same emotional pattern, hoping something will finally shift. Yet the shift does not come from the other person. It comes from the moment you see the pattern clearly. Awareness is the beginning of liberation. When you understand that your longing for those who wound you is a call from your own unconscious, the entire narrative changes. The question is no longer why they hurt you, but why their hurt feels familiar. Something inside you has been waiting for this recognition. A stillness, a clarity, a quiet knowing. You begin to see your heart not as a broken thing, but as a compass guiding you through the night. And this understanding becomes a gentle turning, a soft awakening, a step toward a deeper truth. There are moments when you feel the ache long before the hurt arrives. A tightening in your chest, a heaviness in your breath, a subtle knowing that something is off. Yet you stay. You watch yourself offering softness to someone who cannot hold it. You feel your voice lowering, your needs shrinking, your boundaries dissolving like smoke. It is as if your whole being bends toward the other person in a silent plea, hoping they will notice the quiet devotion in your eyes. You do not call this desperation. You call it love. But beneath that word, something older stirs, something that remembers a time when love was something you had to earn. When you look closely, you notice that your body reacts before your thoughts do. Your shoulders tense at the sound of disappointment. Your stomach drops when you sense distance. Your breath becomes shallow when affection falters. These reactions rise automatically, as if they were carved into your bones long before you learned the language to name them. They are the remnants of emotional patterns that formed when you were still learning what closeness meant. The psyche stores these impressions like images in a dream, and even now, as an adult, you move through relationships guided by these invisible memories. You begin to see that the person you love is not merely an individual, but a symbol. They carry the emotional atmosphere of a story you have been trying to rewrite for years. Their withdrawal resembles the silence you once tried to fill. Their coldness mirrors the absence you once tried to warm. Their inconsistency echoes the uncertainty you once tried to navigate. You are not drawn to their hurtful behavior. You are drawn to the familiar rhythm of a wound that remains unresolved. The psyche seeks what it knows, even when it knows pain. In this sense, loving someone who hurts you becomes a form of emotional alchemy. You step into the fire hoping to transform the lead of an old wound into the gold of a new truth. And yet the fire burns you, not because you are meant to suffer, but because you are standing too close to the flame without understanding its purpose. This flame is not meant to consume you. It is meant to reveal you. Each painful moment reflects a part of yourself you have been avoiding. The abandonment you fear is a doorway to the part of you that still feels abandoned. The rejection you dread is a mirror reflecting the part of you that still feels unworthy of love. You might not be aware of this process as it unfolds. It happens quietly, beneath the surface of your emotions. You feel drawn to the familiar, mistaking it for fate. You call it chemistry, intensity, passion. But it is the unconscious guiding you back to the original wound, so you can finally see it clearly. The forest of your inner world darkens around you, the shadows rising like old memories. Yet in that darkness, you find the truth you have been running from. The reason you cannot walk away has nothing to do with the other person. It has everything to do with the part of you that still believes love must be earned through suffering. This realization lands softly, like the first light of dawn breaking through the trees. You see the outline of your own story, not as a failure, but as a path toward healing. The person who hurt you becomes the catalyst that brings your unconscious to the surface. They awaken the parts of you that were left behind. They illuminate the corners of your heart where old wounds still breathe. And for a moment, you feel a strange sense of gratitude, not for the pain, but for the clarity it brings. Yet this clarity is only the beginning. You sense that there is more to understand, more to uncover, more to integrate. The shadow that once frightened you now invites you deeper into yourself. You feel the call, quiet but insistent, guiding you toward the river of memory that flows beneath your life. And as you follow it, you begin to sense that what you seek is not the healing of a relationship, but the healing of your own story. And so you take another step, knowing the next revelation awaits. There comes a point when you start to notice the cycle with more clarity. You feel yourself anticipating the next disappointment, the next fracture, the next quiet withdrawal that leaves you reaching into empty space. You sense the pattern even as it unfolds, yet a part of you remains frozen, unable to choose anything different. This is the moment when the unconscious steps forward, revealing how deeply these emotional traces live within you. You are not reacting to the present alone. You are reacting to the residue of every moment when love felt uncertain, unpredictable, or conditional. Your heart remembers what your mind has tried to forget. If you listen closely, you can hear the echo of that early distress in your reactions today. When someone pulls away, you feel that old panic rising, as if you are once again standing in a familiar room waiting for a tenderness that never fully arrived. When someone criticizes you, you feel the sting in the same place where older wounds still breathe. And when someone withholds affection, you begin offering more of yourself, hoping your devotion will bridge the gap. This is not a flaw. It is a learned response, shaped by moments when love felt elusive and you believed it was your job to hold everything together. You start to see that your longing is tied to the hope that this time, the story will end differently. You hope that this person will give you what someone else could not. You hope that the tenderness you offer will finally be met. You hope that your patience will soften the heart before you. Yet this hope is built upon an illusion, the illusion that healing comes from convincing another person to choose you. The psyche does not seek their love. It seeks resolution. And so you return to the flame, believing you are chasing a person, when in truth you are chasing a moment of inner completion. In the shadows of this pattern, you discover the deeper truth. Your heart is not trying to fix the other person. It is trying to fix the moment in your past when love broke in your hands. This is why you stay longer than you should. This is why you explain more than necessary. This is why you forgive what should have been final. You are trying to rewrite a memory, but the memory is not theirs to change. It belongs to you, and until you turn inward, you remain caught in the loop of seeking external redemption for an internal wound. Once you recognize this, your inner landscape begins to shift. The forest that once felt suffocating now reveals hidden paths. You notice how the light passes through the leaves, how the wind carries whispers from the deeper layers of your psyche. You realize that this pain is not a sign that you are unworthy, but a sign that something within you is awakening. The wound is not just a wound. It is an invitation. It calls you to return to the place where your innocence fractured, not to relive the pain, but to reclaim the part of yourself that stayed behind. You start to understand that the people who hurt you are not chosen out of self-sabotage. They are chosen out of resonance. They carry a frequency that matches the vibration of your unresolved past. Their emotional distance mirrors the distance you once felt. Their inconsistency reflects the instability you once navigated. Their lack of nurturing evokes the care you once longed for. The unconscious recognizes these patterns instantly, long before consciousness catches up. This recognition creates the feeling of connection, the spark, the magnetism. It is not love, but familiarity disguised as destiny. Seeing this truth softens something in you. You stop blaming yourself for loving deeply. You stop blaming yourself for staying too long. You stop blaming yourself for feeling attached to someone who could not receive you. You begin to see your behavior not as weakness, but as a reflection of your desire to heal. Your heart kept trying because it wanted to free itself from the old ache. And now, as the shadows shift around you, you feel a stirring of compassion for the younger self who learned these patterns in the first place. This compassion opens a doorway, a quiet invitation to explore even deeper. You sense that the real transformation is not in understanding why you are drawn to pain, but in discovering who you were before pain shaped your understanding of love. And as you step toward this deeper truth, you feel the next chapter of your inner journey calling your name. There is a moment when you finally see the truth not as an idea, but as a living presence inside you. It usually arrives in a quiet hour, when the world around you softens and your defenses begin to fade. In that stillness, you feel the full weight of the pattern. You recognize how much of your heart has been shaped by longing, how much of your tenderness has been spent trying to reach someone who was never positioned to meet you. You realize that the ache you keep returning to is not the ache of the present moment, but the echo of an old yearning that has not yet found its rest. And as this realization settles, you feel the subtle tremor of grief rising from the depths of your being. This grief is not a sign that you have failed. It is a sign that you are finally seeing the wound without distraction. You see the child within you who learned to chase affection, who learned to silence their own needs, who learned to stay even when the room grew cold. You see how hard that child tried, how fiercely they believed that if they were perfect enough, quiet enough, giving enough, they would finally be loved in the way they needed. This child is still inside you, guiding your choices from the shadows. And now, for the first time, you witness their struggle with compassion rather than judgment. When you hold this image gently, a shift begins. The person who hurt you starts to lose their symbolic power. You notice that their voice no longer carries the same weight. Their approval no longer feels like the key to your worth. Their absence no longer defines your value. Something in your psyche loosens its grip, as if an old knot were finally beginning to unravel. The unconscious releases what no longer serves you the moment you recognize the pattern without trying to fix it through another person. Awareness creates space, and space creates healing. In this space, you begin to understand a deeper truth. Loving those who hurt you was never about love. It was about reenactment. It was about survival patterns trying to complete themselves. It was about the part of you that believed pain was the price of intimacy. But as you awaken to this truth, the landscape within you transforms. The forest that once felt oppressive now appears softer, touched by the early light of dawn. The shadows that once frightened you now appear less like monsters and more like lost parts of yourself waiting to be integrated. You may feel loneliness at this stage, but it is a sacred loneliness. It is the quiet that follows after a long storm. It is the space where your soul begins to breathe again. In this quiet, you sense that your heart has been operating with old instructions, repeating old dances, replaying old stories. And now the story is coming to an end, not with anger or bitterness, but with recognition. The chains fall away as soon as you realize they were never locked. They were held by memory, not by destiny. As this truth settles, a gentle fire awakens inside you. Not the destructive fire of longing, but the clear fire of self-remembrance. It is the fire that says you deserve reciprocity. You deserve tenderness. You deserve someone who turns toward you with open eyes and steady hands. But even more than that, you deserve to stop carrying the burden of trying to fix what was never yours to fix. The fire glows softly, illuminating the parts of you that have lived in darkness. And as you stand in this new light, you feel a sense of wholeness returning. You begin to taste freedom, not as a dramatic escape, but as a silent unfolding. A slow exhale, a gentle reclaiming. You feel the river of your inner life flowing again, carrying with it the debris of old stories. You watch them drift away without clinging to any of them. You sense the presence of something deeper, something that has been waiting for you beneath the wounds. It feels like truth, like clarity, like the first breath after waking from a long and heavy dream. And within this new awareness, you feel the next movement of your journey. A quiet ascent, a soft rising toward a higher understanding of yourself. The pain no longer demands your loyalty. The past no longer shapes your choices. You feel yourself stepping into a new chapter where love is no longer confused with suffering. And as this door opens, you sense the beginning of transcendence, gently pulling you forward. There is a moment when everything that once felt tangled begins to soften. You start to sense an alignment forming within you, as if each insight from your past were settling into its rightful place. The ache that once felt sharp now feels quieter, almost tender, as if it were finally being acknowledged after years of being ignored. You notice that the longing which once pulled you toward people who hurt you no longer has the same authority. It feels more like an echo than a command, a memory dissolving in the gentle warmth of a new awareness. And in this shift, you realize that your heart has been guiding you toward yourself all along. As the inner landscape opens, you begin to feel the presence of the self, the deeper center of your psyche that has watched every heartbreak, every return, every moment of confusion with infinite patience. This presence does not shame you for the paths you walked. It simply holds you, the way light holds the darkness without fear. You sense a quiet intelligence in the way your journey unfolded, as if every painful attachment were a thread leading you closer to this moment of understanding. The people who wounded you did not define you. They revealed you. They showed you where love was still waiting to be claimed within yourself. In this expanded awareness, the symbols of your inner world rearrange themselves. The forest that once felt dense now feels alive with pathways. The river that once carried the memories of old wounds now flows with a new clarity. The shadows that once frightened you now reflect your own forgotten wisdom. You see that each metaphor was not merely a poetic image, but a language your unconscious used to guide you through the night. You followed the torch of longing through the darkness until it brought you to the threshold of your own becoming. You begin to understand that transcendence is not the absence of pain, but the transformation of your relationship to it. The ache no longer binds you. It teaches you. It leads you toward the truth that love is not something to be begged for, performed for, or earned through suffering. Love is the natural expression of a heart that has remembered its own worth. And as this realization rises from within, it feels like stepping into a temple made of your own clarity. A temple where the past loses its power and your presence becomes the sacred flame. In this temple, you feel the merging of your fragmented parts. The child who once chased affection stands beside the adult who now understands. The shadow that once confused you now kneels beside the light that finally sees it. The wound that once shaped your choices now opens into a bridge that leads you toward wisdom. This integration feels subtle at first, like the quiet moment just before sunrise when the world has not fully woken yet. But as the light grows, you feel your entire being reorienting itself toward truth. Something inside you rises with surprising gentleness. A soft knowing, a quiet assurance. You realize that you do not need to cling to anyone who harms you, because the part of you that once needed their presence has finally been seen, held, and understood. The cycle loses its momentum when the inner truth becomes more compelling than the outer pattern. The unconscious no longer pulls you toward reenactment because the lesson has been integrated. You feel a stillness forming in your chest, a peace that does not depend on anyone else's behavior. And as this peace settles, you sense the return of your inner strength. Not the strength that clenches, but the strength that breathes. The strength that knows. The strength that trusts the quiet voice within. You feel your heart opening, not toward those who hurt you, but toward life itself. Toward a deeper love that flows from the center of your being. Toward relationships rooted in reciprocity, presence, and truth. You feel yourself stepping out of the old story and into a new one, guided not by fear or longing, but by clarity. Here, in this heightened awareness, you understand the entire journey. The patterns, the heartbreaks, the confusion. They were not detours. They were openings. They were the steps that brought you home. And in this homecoming, you feel a communion forming within you, a soft merging of all the parts of your soul. The night that once held you now releases you. The dawn that once seemed distant now rests gently in your hands. And as you breathe into this moment, you sense that the closing is not an ending, but an invitation. A quiet welcome into the life that calls your name with tenderness. A life where love no longer hurts. A life where you finally recognize your own light. There is a quiet that follows deep understanding, a softness that fills the spaces where confusion once lived. In this quiet, you begin to feel your own presence more clearly, as if a veil has been lifted from your perception. You realize that the love you kept offering to those who wounded you was never wasted. It was the language your heart used to show you where healing was needed. Now that you see the pattern, you no longer have to walk toward the same fire. The warmth you were seeking in others begins to rise from within, slow and steady, like the glow of embers in a darkened room. You feel yourself breathing more deeply, as if your chest finally remembers what it means to expand without fear. As this breath settles, you recognize something profound. The pain that once felt like a punishment was, in truth, a guide. It led you back to the forgotten parts of your own soul, the parts that once believed love and hurt were intertwined. You look at these parts now with compassion. You understand why they clung to certain people, why they feared letting go, why they mistook scarcity for devotion. There is no anger here, only understanding. This understanding creates a spaciousness inside you, a calm field where your heart can rest without needing anything in return. You feel the quiet presence of your own selfhood, steady and luminous, like a small flame that never truly went out. In this presence, you realize that healing is not an event, but a return to the center you abandoned when love felt unsafe, a return to the innocence you lost when tenderness became conditional, a return to the truth that you are worthy, not because someone chooses you, but because you exist. This return does not require grand gestures. It happens in gentle moments, in the way you speak to yourself, in the boundaries you allow to form naturally, in the softness you extend to your own heart. You begin to sense that your relationship with yourself is the root from which all future love will grow. And as this root strengthens, you feel the past loosening its hold, like leaves releasing their grip as the season turns. There is a peaceful clarity rising in you now, the kind that comes when the inner storm finally subsides. You do not need answers. You do not need closure from those who hurt you. You do not need to revisit what has already taught you its lesson. Your heart knows its own direction, guided by a deeper intelligence that has been waiting patiently for you to listen. As you walk forward, you carry the light of this understanding with you, not as a shield, but as a quiet companion. It reminds you that love does not have to be complicated. It does not have to be earned. It does not have to hurt. It simply flows where truth is present. And so you step into the days ahead with a different kind of openness, not the openness that leaves you vulnerable to old wounds, but the openness that rises from self-remembrance. You feel the world around you shifting in response. Relationships begin to reflect the clarity you now hold. Connections deepen where reciprocity exists and dissolve where it does not. You no longer chase. You no longer shrink. You no longer confuse longing with destiny. Your heart has learned to choose differently, not through force, but through recognition. And in this recognition, you find a quiet kind of freedom. As this freedom settles, you feel a gentle invitation forming. An invitation to observe yourself with tenderness in the coming days, to notice the moments when the old pattern tries to pull you back, to breathe into them without judgment, and to choose the path that honors your truth. You do not need to rush. You do not need to prove anything. Healing grows at the pace of your own readiness, and with every quiet act of awareness, you reinforce the new story emerging within you. And now, as the final words settle, you feel a subtle warmth in your chest, a sense of communion, a sense of peace, a sense that something inside you has finally begun to return home.